Welcome to another episode of Lurie Breaks It Down, a podcast where we dig deeply to connect the dots on the issues that shape our world. I'm Lurie Daniel Favors, author, activist, attorney, and the host of the Lurie Daniel Favors Show on SiriusXM's Urban View, channel 126. If you like what you're about to hear, go ahead and give us 5 stars and then tell everybody that you know. And if you don't like it, just, keep it to yourself and pray our strength, okay? Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to check out my YouTube page, Lurie Daniel Favors Media, where you should subscribe, like, and share, because then you'll get notified when I post videos from my show, which I do just about every single day, and when I go live with my YouTube audience. Have you guys ever heard that story? It's called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It was a film and a book, but it's basically a story about a black man who is pretending to be like an Uncle Tom character. And he's doing that for a very intentional reason, not because he doesn't actually believe in black people or he wants to actually sell black people out. No, he's playing like he's an Uncle Tom because he wants to get access to this CIA training program. And he successfully does that. He gets access to the CIA training program, and then he uses the information that he gets from the CIA training program to basically spark off the next American Revolution, wherein black people are empowered to do whatever it is that black people are empowered to do. Now, the book ends at a part where you're sort of given access to imagining what would it be like if we had people within our community who got access to ultra secret, high-powered spy and defense mechanism information and then shared it with all of us in a very covert way, so that those of us who have been victimized by white nationalism for centuries would be able to not just have a chance at fighting back, but would be able to win. It's a very important concept. And this idea of being the spook is one that says there are some black people who get access to access points, if you will, doorways of power. And when they get access to those access points or those doorways of power, they use that access not so that they can get a new car or buy a new house or, get some furs or go on a trip or something. No, they use that access to that power intentionally and explicitly to benefit their own community. And that notion, are you going to be in these spaces with high places just to get by for yourself? Or are you going to use that information that you get to go back and help your own? That is a very important question. And being a spook who sat by the door recognizes that, yeah, you are going to be given access, but there is an expectation that you're going to bring that access to the benefit of your people. The reason that story matters is because we have to talk about the latest iterations of what's going on with criminal justice and criminal injustice. And we need more of us. And by us, I mean us. And if you don't know who I mean by us, then I don't mean you. But I need more of us, capital U, to be spooks who get on them juries. And let's talk about why this matters. Today's conversation is really all about jury nullification, but I want to start with, because the phrase jury nullification is a multisyllabic legal word that quite frankly makes people's eyes glaze over. And so I want to start by having a conversation about the DC sandwich guy. Do you remember the DC sandwich guy? The DC sandwich guy is this white man who's in like this t-shirt. It's like a polo. It's not even a t-shirt. It's more like a polo shirt. In my memory of it, I imagine him in a long sleeve button down, buttoned up, but button down style shirt. But actually, I think he was in more of like a polo shirt. He's got some shorts on, and we see him when we first encounter him. He is shown in videos that went viral where this white man in his loafers, it might have been sneakers, but more like a kid, like canvas type of shoe. Not somebody who was at all preparing for the battle. Now, I know some of you are wondering, Lurie, you started out talking about spooks who sit by doors and getting on juries, and now you're talking about the white sandwich guy. And trust me, you're going to want to understand how the story evolves so that we can get back to discussing how we can all be spooks who get on these juries. So this white guy who is holding a Subway sandwich, and I don't even know if it was a Subway sandwich. Subway's getting a whole lot of free press out of this, but he's holding a hoagie style sandwich, and he's yelling at these officers because he, like so many residents in DC and so many of us who are all across the country who are very angered and upset at seeing all of this hundreds of millions of dollars daily being wasted, and all of these officers who are flooding the streets of DC to deal with the extraordinarily dangerous crimes of walking around with an open container, or sitting on your stoop to smoke that J because you ain't had no backyard to smoke it in. And so technically, because you were outside, you get arrested, even though cannabis is not illegal in Washington, D.C. It's these sorts of things, very frustrating for people. And sandwich guy, well, again, you should know his name, Sean Dunn. Sean Dunn, like so many of us, was very upset. It just so happens that he was upset while being accompanied with a sandwich. And we see him as he is yelling at these officers, kind of taunting them in some ways. It looks like it's hard to hear because the video was, it was loud street level video where, people are just taking pictures with their cameras and whatnot. Well, all of a sudden we see him basically yelling. And then he holds his arm back with the sandwich and then he tosses it at the guy, at the officers in front of him. Now, these are some big burly officers and they're like, I'm law enforcement. Who do you think you are, sandwich guy? And so sandwich guy, after hurling the sandwich, which looked substantively, it looked like it was going to be a good sandwich. He sacrifices the sandwich and he hurls the sandwich at the officers and then he turns around and takes off. Now, I don't know if Sean Dunn actually intended to do this. I don't know if it was a crime or an alleged crime of passion. I don't know what it was, but what we do know is that man could run. And just like Forrest Gump, he was running for his life. And he ran, even though those officers took after him like he had just said, I am Osama bin Laden's son. Like they took after him like he had just declared war on the United States. They took after him like he was the greatest threat to the safety of the institution known as Washington, D.C. And they chased down Sandwich Guy. They caught Sandwich Guy, also known as Sean Dunn, and he ends up facing arrest. He's arrested. He is facing many charges, federal charges, in fact, and some serious charges, right? Because we were clear that these officers were very angry. And one thing any of us who have had to deal with any level of defending people who have been accused of assaulting officers, or you have seen what happens to people accused of assaulting officers, you know that they were going to bring down the hammer and the sandwich. And they did. And they confronted him with federal charges. And I want you to take a listen to this clip. This is U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro, also known as one of the members of the cast of characters frequently referred to as the most inebriated of Fox News hosts. But she's no longer a Fox News host. She is now the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. And she had this to say about Sandwich Guy and the fact that they were going to bring down the hammer of the law and the sandwich, too. Take a listen.
So President Trump has vowed to make D.C. safe and beautiful again. And as part of his effort to fight crime, he's bringing in our federal law enforcement partners like FBI, ATF, DEA, or Park Police, everybody to help the Metropolitan PD fight crime. And the president's message to the criminals was, if you spit, we hit. Well, we didn't quite do that the other night when an individual went up to one of the federal law enforcement officers and started jumping up and down, screaming at him, berating him, yelling at him. And then he took a Subway sandwich about this big and took it and threw it at the officer. He thought it was funny. Well, he doesn't think it's funny today because we charged him with a felony, assault on a police officer. And we're going to back the police to the hilt. So there. Stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else.
And that was the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. So there, stick your Subway sandwich somewhere else. Now, as I did mention on my show, for some reason with the lighting in Jeanine Pirro's office at the time that she took this video, it's very much given light-skinned black woman. I don't know, it was weird. Like I've often looked at her and thought, she looks a little tint of brown. There's an olive cast to her complexion. Not that I look at her often because I don't watch Fox, but when I've seen her in these clips looking like she's very inebriated, sounding like she's very inebriated, I've often thought, I wonder what her background is. But in this video in particular, apropos of nothing, this woman is giving somebody in her ancestry was tipping through the slave quarters. I don't know. I don't claim her, but I'm just saying there was something weird about that. That has absolutely, quite frankly, nothing to do with the topic of the day. I'm just mentioning it because this is my podcast and I thought I would mention it because it struck me as quite interesting. But the reason I mentioned this story is because Jeanine Pirro and many of the folks who support people like Jeanine Pirro were really excited to capture Sandwich Guy. And she was so excited that she talked about indicting Sandwich Guy in this video as if it had already happened. Unfortunately for Jeanine Pirro, that was not the case. And when Jeanine Pirro made this video and then produced this video, she did so before she got word of the fact that the jury, the grand jury that had been impaneled to determine whether or not Sandwich Guy should face criminal prosecution for felonies for this, Jeanine Pirro released that video before that grand jury had actually returned its decision. And according to the reports, the federal grand jury that was impaneled to indict Sandwich Guy didn't do so. They were like, nah, we not doing it. We saw the video. We saw the evidence that you all put forward. And we have decided that none of your evidence requires us to say that that man is guilty of what you said he's guilty of. Now, did we all see Sean Dunn, sandwich guy, toss that sandwich at those officers? Yes, we did. Did we see him yelling whatever it was he was yelling at those officers before said sandwich was hurled in their direction? Yes, we did. However, the jury who saw the same thing we saw, who saw the evidence and far more evidence, I'm sure, that was introduced, because when you're in a grand jury, the prosecutors get to determine what evidence you're going to get. They get to determine whether or not you're going to hear from all the people who might have something that might be either accusatory or exculpatory for the person that they're trying to get an indictment against. And the prosecutor has so much power that's why we have this phrase, you can indict a ham sandwich. That is a phrase that we use in the law all the time. You could indict a ham sandwich because getting an indictment is super, super easy. It's one of the easiest things for prosecutors to do, other than wake up in the morning and get ready to get dressed to go to work. But according to CBS News, that grand jury said nope. Even though you can technically indict a ham sandwich today, as it pertains to the justice of this grand jury, you will not indict the ham sandwich thrower. Now, CBS News goes on to state, quote, it is unclear whether or not federal prosecutors will try again to secure an indictment against him or seek misdemeanor charges instead, which would not require a grand jury decision. He is charged with one count of assaulting federal law enforcement. No plea has been entered in the case, but there is a preliminary hearing scheduled for his case on September 4th, end quote. Now, the reason this matters is because you use a grand jury for indictment purposes for felonies. These are serious crimes for which you will be serving at least a year or more incarceration. And so if you can't get a grand jury to indict you and they will refuse to move your case forward at the federal level, then the prosecutors have another option. They can lower the charges, lower the intensity of the charges that they levied against you. And instead of charging you with felonies, they could charge you with misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are typically crimes that upon conviction, you are going to serve less than 365 full days. Now, the challenge here is that if you're going to charge him with a misdemeanor, he as the defendant still has a very important decision to make. Should he have his case heard and determined by a judge, or because he's a defendant, he could also decide, instead of having the judge be the sole arbiter of that case, he could instead see if a jury option would be more according to his interests. And frankly, if I'm sandwich guy, I'm going with the jury every day, because a judge cannot do in the same way what a jury can do. And that is one of the reasons why this conversation today is so very important. And while I have never met sandwich guy, I just want you to know, sandwich guy, we appreciate you. Salute. Now, this is important again because we're not just talking about sandwich throwing people. We're talking about one of the most important forms of resistance that us, once again, are able to participate in, and that is called jury nullification. That is essentially what this jury did. According to the affidavit that was entered, sandwich guy was yelling at them officers, "Fuck you, you fucking fascists. Why are you here? I don't want you in my city." And he was yelling that at them from across the street. And then he approached them in only the way that an empowered white man could, because I don't know that a black man would be able to take these sorts of steps. But in this way, go ahead on, righteous sandwich throwing guy. He yells from across the street. He crosses the street, and then he admits to law enforcement is in only the way that a white person could. "I did it, buddy. I threw the sandwich." He didn't actually have buddy in that quote, but he did say, "I did it. I threw a sandwich." All of this was entered into the record. All of this was presented to that grand jury, and the grand jury said, "Menag here." The grand jury said, "Nope, not today." And so jury nullification is a process whereby the jury is able to say, yes, we saw all the evidence. Yes, you definitely established that this person who you are prosecuting right now is guilty of the thing that you said that they are guilty of. However, having looked at all the evidence and having considered everything that I need to consider, I have decided that even though you met your legal burden to convince we, the jury, that they are guilty of this thing, I'm still going to vote not guilty because I do not believe in the principles of this prosecution. Or I'm still going to vote not guilty because I do not see you attempting to prosecute white people in the same way and with the same fervor and with the same intensity that you are prosecuting this black defendant in front of me right now. Jury nullification is the way that the jury can say, I know that this person is guilty. You, the prosecutor, demonstrated that they're guilty, and I'm voting not guilty anyway. very important concept that has been written about extensively by a number of legal scholars who have talked about jury nullification as a form of racial justice and have encouraged Black jury members and participants to be aware of their rights to engage in jury nullification and to do everything that they can to do so when it is appropriate. Now, jury nullification is sort of taking off in Washington, D.C. right now because we have this sort of trifecta of challenges that is bearing down on the criminal legal system. Number one, you've got the wholesale occupation of military forces of the streets of D.C., which really pisses people off. But it also leads to increased policing. Increased policing leads to increased numbers of arrests. And unfortunately, we're not seeing arrests for like attempts to blow up the White House or attempts to engage in some sort of harm to the president, and God forbid anybody would do that. Don't do that. And if anybody from the feds is listening to this podcast, just know I'm talking hypotheticals. I ain't got no intentions. I would never. Okay. So don't be knocking on my door because I ain't got nothing for you. I am not a criminal and I do not do crime. Nope, not at all. But you've got this increased presence of police officers, of DHS agents, of FBI agents, of DEA agents, of ATF agents, of the National Guard. National Guards members who, remember, are supposed to be weekend warriors. National Guards members who are supposed to be back home working in their actual 9-to-5 jobs, living with their actual families and engaging in their actual lives. But no, they have been redeployed to the streets of D.C. where they are, according to the notes, doing the very important violent prevention work of cleaning up parks and changing light bulbs and street lamps. Why? Mainly because the people that used to clean up those parks and change light bulbs and street lamps were all fired by Doge and are currently sitting on stoops that are now being overly policed by people in all the agencies I just mentioned, including the members of the National Guard, who, in addition to accompanying all of those other agencies, are picking up trash and changing light bulbs. What an amazingly efficient use of money. And of course, that was said totally tongue-in-cheek. But this idea of juries saying, you know what? No, we disagree with what's happening here. We disagree with this prosecution. It appears to be taking off. We're seeing that in addition to Sandwich Guy, that earlier this summer, there was another arrest of a woman from D.C. who was accused of assaulting agents during an ICE arrest. She's been in front of 3 grand juries because U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro's office is attempting to prosecute this woman, Sydney Reed, as much as they possibly can. Sydney Reed done been in front of 3 grand juries, and 3 grand juries declined to indict her, and she again was accused of assaulting an FBI agent. What's happening here is the juries are becoming increasingly aware, the jury members are becoming increasingly aware of the fact that they do not have to participate in what is being increasingly perceived as the wholesale wrongful prosecution of people who live in communities that are now under siege. Because when I flood your communities with a ton of policing and a ton of policing resources, and then I take prosecutors who used to work for the federal government prosecuting real important crimes, and I reassign them to dealing with the low-level issues that are being now captured by this dragnet of policing, then you are also going to see increased prosecutions. When those federal prosecutors not only are being reassigned to handle these low-level crimes, but are also then being told that they have to, as we discussed extensively in yesterday's podcast episode, they have to try to get you charged with the highest level of criminality that they can for that open container. It also increases the numbers of people who are going in front of the criminal legal system, which means that there are now backlogs that the judges and their staffs have to deal with. And all of this is happening with the reality that there was already a decrease in crime, and there ain't nothing that these officers are doing in DC except harassing Black people. When that happens, you are going to create an environment where people are going to resist. And that is what we were seeing happening with these jury nullifications. And jury nullification, again, is what happens when you sit on a jury and say, yeah, you might have shown that this person was guilty, and I'm going to say they're not guilty anyway for my own reason. What's important about this is similar to Sandwich Guy. Jeanine Pirro's office has said that they're going to now lower the levels of charges that Sydney Reed is facing from felonies to misdemeanors. And like Sandwich Guy, Sydney Reed is going to get to decide when they charge her with this misdemeanor, should she go in front of a judge or should she go in front of a jury? If I'm Sydney Reed, I'm going in front of that jury because I'm hoping that the jury at the misdemeanor trial will do what the jury at the grand jury level did and refuse to indict. And this is one of the things that I need us to understand that we have within our power and capacity. When you are called to serve on a jury, you need to know your rights of jury nullification. So take a listen to this video clip. This is called Jury Nullification for Beginners, and it's extraordinarily important because, as I said, there have been a number of Black scholars and civil rights organizers and thinkers and people who are way more informed on these topics than I am, who have talked about jury nullification as one of the most powerful tools tools that Black people on juries can hold if Black people are actually serving on juries, which we'll get to later. But for now, take a listen to this beginner's guide to jury nullification.
Jury nullification is one of the most powerful tools in a jury's arsenal to make a political statement. Every single person in this country needs to know what it is, but you can't exactly go around saying that you know what jury nullification is. Jury nullification is a jury's knowing and deliberate rejection of evidence or the law as a means of sending a message about a social issue, or because the demands of the law are at odds with the jury's own moral values. Basically, the jury says, he did it, but he's not guilty. Jury nullification is entirely legal, but legal counsel are not permitted to tell juries about the existence of it. You could possibly be arrested or held in contempt if you talk about or try to educate about jury nullification in the wrong circumstances, such as directly to potential jurors. So now that you know what jury nullification is, no, you don't. But you should share this video so that other people also don't know what it is. Jury nullification was used historically as a form of protest when the government passed the 1800s Fugitive Slave Clause, which compelled citizens to assist law enforcement with the capture of runaway slaves. And abolitionists used jury nullification as a form of protest by refusing to convict these slaves. It was also used in a similar fashion during Prohibition. So remember, if you're potentially selected to be a juror for a high-stakes case where you have the opportunity to make a political statement by opting for jury nullification, do not utter a word about jury nullification. It could get you immediately disqualified. The more you know.
The more you know, the more you can do. And I need us to do a lot. So it's not even just in these cases where there's sandwich guy or somebody is intervening in an ICE arrest and happens to beat the brakes off of the ICE officer and then charged for arrest. Obviously, we can see there's some resonance with what's happening within broader society that might lead a jury to want to say, yeah, no, what we are going to do is nullify this entire effort. But it's not just those sorts of cases. We are also increasingly experiencing the political attacks and the weaponization of the Justice Department for political arrests. And you may recall that a few weeks ago, well, darn, at this point, it's a few months ago, when Congressional Representative LaMonica McIver, Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ras Baraka, and a number of other folks who were down at Delaney Hall to provide their legally mandated role of oversight over this facility that ICE had taken without properly following the municipality's rules for doing so, and had taken this facility that basically they were using to house untold numbers of migrants and people they had snatched up off the street that could nobody get in touch with. Remember when they first arrested Mayor Ras Baraka on some bullshit ass charges, and they were such bullshit ass charges that they had to drop those charges? Well, after they dropped those charges, they also then decided to charge and move forward with charging Congressional Representative LaMonica McIver because they said she used her forearms to assault an officer. And I'm just like, y'all don't like Black women who got a body, okay? Like, she did not use her because you could all see the videos. There was no, I'm like, how do you even use a forearm to assault somebody? Like, your forearm is between your elbow and your shoulder. What am I, Millie rocking into you? Like, what is happening? Like, how am I using my forearms as an assault mechanism? I don't know. But the point is, this is what they're claiming. Listen to Rachel Cohen, who explains jury nullification in a way that also talks about its role in preventing the political prosecutions that are going to increasingly be filed against people who speak out against this administration.
Representative LaMonica McIver was indicted today. She faces a maximum term of 17 years. Just as a reminder, she was arrested, charged, and now indicted for going on a legally allowed congressional oversight visit to an ICE facility that is in her congressional district to make sure that they were following all of the laws related to detention, and a bunch of police tried to prevent her from entering, and now she's being charged with impeding and interfering with federal law enforcement. Two things. Number one, I think that it's really important, as we're all talking about, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Donald Trump is threatening to arrest Gavin Newsom, that Donald Trump is already arresting political opponents. He is charging and indicting them. Number two, totally unconnected, I think it's a good time to talk about jury nullification again. Because in the United States, even if you think that someone is technically guilty of a crime beyond a reasonable doubt, like they have done all of the elements of the crime necessary, if you are on a jury, you do not have to find them guilty. Not required. Jury nullification is kind of an extension of the necessity defense, like self-defense or similar, and it allows a jury of one's peers to decide that even if someone has done something that is technically against the law in the United States, if they think that that person should never have been charged, should not be in jail, they don't have to find them guilty. And if you're saying to yourself, well, I've served on a jury, why haven't I heard of this before? This can't possibly be true. Number one, I'm not wearing my dipshit Harvard law hat, but I did in fact go to law school. And number two, it's because defense attorneys aren't actually allowed to tell you about it because then too many people would exercise it. You should not say to people that you are exercising jury nullification. All that you do is you go in and you vote not guilty. And people say no, but like they're definitely guilty. And you say, we don't have to find them guilty, not guilty. And then you never tell anyone that you did it. because the jury deliberations are sealed. We're going to see ever more politicized prosecutions, but you actually don't have to only exercise jury nullification and politicize prosecutions if you get called onto a jury where you are, I don't know, being asked to put someone who was protesting into prison. Don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. I actually learned about jury nullification because I was going to my civil procedure professor's office hours complaining about the fact that I didn't think the system was very fair so many times that he told me to Google Paul Butler, who he had gone to law school with, is now a professor at Georgetown Law School, but who wrote this essay, Racially Based Jury Nullification, Black Power in the Criminal Justice System, and was well known for arguing that Black jurors should refuse to convict Black people in DC for nonviolent crimes. Very high level distillation. Apologies if I misstated anything. But anyway, my professor was like, get the fuck out of my office hours and go read this and leave me alone. A Vox article on it from 2016. You can Google a friend or a family member gets jury duty. Tell them about jury nullification because the defense attorney is not allowed. Very cool and functional system we have in the United States of America. But they exploit it to put people in jail. So exploit it to not put them in jail.
Yeah. So this is why you don't really hear a lot about jury nullification. One, if I were defending you in court, I couldn't also then explain to the jury, as a part of your role in serving on a jury, you could also nullify this entire bullshit ass approach. I couldn't say that. I could be put in contempt of court. The prosecutors certainly aren't going to tell you that. The judges aren't going to tell you that. There's nobody within the legal system who at the time of selecting a jury is able to then give you a mini primer on jury nullification. It's a hush hush sort of thing, which is of course why we got to be as loud about it as possible. So this is important here because as you are approaching the point in time where you are selected to be on a jury, you have to be aware. There's some decisions you're going to have to make. Maybe you're on a jury where the person did it and the thing that they are accused of doing was so terrible and so awful to the community that you're like, absolutely not. You deserve it. You harmed our community. You harmed this person. You were a scourge on our society. You got to go to jail. Now, as an abolitionist, I don't like saying that, but I also know that I live in a real world with real Black people. And one thing real Black people are is we tend to be very conservative. And if you are doing ththings in our community that's destroying the community, we don't like that. I don't think anybody likes that. But it does mean that I'm not saying that you should just say not guilty for everybody. If, you on a jury where it's like Nino Brown because of New Jack City situation, then you throw that mug in the jail. Throw him beneath the jail. But if it's somebody who you're like, wait a minute, this is, they were accused of a crime, but this feels so unfair. This is unjust the way this whole thing happened. And then, wait, hold on. Not only was this unjust and unfair, but I know that there are 11 other people who do the same thing. They don't never have to face criminal charges. Then that is a point where you would want to ask yourself, should I nullify? Now, you ain't going to tell nobody that you had this internal quandary. You ain't going to talk about it. You're not even going to mention it to the other jurors, a part of your jury pool. Because once you do that, you can be dismissed from the jury. Once you tell other jurors that you are there to make sure that there is justice being done, and if that justice means that you got to nullify this particular verdict, then that's what you're going to do. Shh, don't say that. Just keep it to yourself. Keep it quiet. Now, here's the other thing. You can't nullify a verdict if you're not on the jury, and you can't become a part of a jury pool if you're not registered to vote, or if when you are called from the voter pools to be on the jury, you say, oh, I can't do this. It's going to be too hard. And so let's back up a little bit. You get called to be a part of a jury pool, which might then allow you to be selected to serve on a jury from a variety of spaces. But for most states, it's based on who has registered to vote. So if you have not registered to vote, you can't even be a part of this conversation. Look at how much damage you're doing to the community. Just sitting over there, having everybody else decide electorally what you should and should not get. And then you can't even be a part of helping to defend the legal sanctity of your space. Just register to vote, please. Just register to vote. So you register to vote, then you are eligible to be considered a part of a jury pool. They may select your name once. They may never select your name. I used to get selected a whole lot. And then once they got me into the jury pool and they found that I was a lawyer, I would be dismissed. So there are some professions that are definitely going to have a more difficult time getting on a jury than others. There are some professions where if you are an hourly worker and you know that if you don't go to work, you don't eat. It's not like somebody who's a salaried position that might have a benefits package that says if you're not here at work physically because you're serving on a jury, you're still going to get paid. There's a little bit of an asterisk here for you, because if you are an hourly worker and there is no benefits package that includes coverage of your salary or of your wages, if you are selected for a jury, then you may not be able to engage in this form of protest or civic engagement. I get it. This is not about having people break their backs in order to do this work, but it is about having people be a lot more discriminating about whether or not they are going to do the work of serving on a jury or not. When I mentioned this topic briefly on my show this morning, we had a caller, Emeka, who is an attorney in Philadelphia, and had some things to say about all the black people who are potential jurors who use their power to never serve on a jury, and the very significant harm that causes to all of us within the black community. Take a listen. Emeka in Philly, first-time caller. Welcome, Emeka. Your thoughts this morning?
Hi, Lurie. Thank you for talking about this issue about jury nullification.
Yeah.
And also the importance of black people to be on a jury. So I'm an attorney in Philadelphia, and I can't tell you the number of cases where a black defendant is on the jury. You have a limited number of people, of black people in the jury pool. And as soon as the judge asks about a hardship, 90% of the black hands go in.
Yep.
And I understand that there's, socioeconomic reasons why it's difficult for us to serve on jurors. But we have a responsibility to make sure that black defendant gets a fair trial in an unfair criminal justice system. And it's so important. It frustrates me and it frustrates defense attorneys all across the country when that happens, because we know automatically that if we don't get some black people or minorities on the jury, the chances of getting an acquittal are dramatically go down.
That's right.
And that's just the reality. Right. And people wrongfully convicted and incarcerated, and a lot of times it's because, they didn't have fair representation on that jury.
Right. And so at this point, it's not even a function of guilt or innocence. It's about fairness. Right. It's about who are you actually going to be able to have, because if the jury is making if they're ascertaining whether or not they think you're guilty or innocent, and that jury is not from your community, and that jury has been raised, for example, to see your cornrows as indications of criminality, or that jury has been raised to see anybody darker than a brown paper bag is obviously guilty of criminality, or they were perhaps they saw a video of people who look just like the defendant rapping and the hip hoppity bebopping and talking about gangster stuff, and they call themselves little gangster this. Of course he did it. He's got to be guilty. When those are the people on the jury, how do you think they're actually taking in the evidence that the defense attorneys are putting forward? Everything that they're hearing in defense of that defendant is going through a filter of course, he's a gang-banging, cornrow-wearing, dreadlock, spliff smoking. These are the filters that all the evidence and the defense arguments that someone like Emeka is making, it's got to make it through all of those filters before it might be heard in a way that would allow for that defendant to be effectively evaluated. So as attorney Emeka was saying there, we understand that if you do not have the financial situation that would allow you to serve on a jury, then clearly we're not talking to you. But for everybody else who could, we need you to sit and serve on those juries. When they ask if there's a hardship, unless the hardship is you are a salary worker or you got 3 kids outside in the car and you ain't got no child care, unless that's your hardship, I'm going to need you to keep your hand down. I'm going to need you to make sure that you say that, no, I can be in this space. I'm going to need you to serve in them juries, because that is how we ensure that our communities are protected from the weaponization of the legal system as against us. Be the spook who gets on the jury. Be the spook who's able to ensure that you are going to not allow this legal system to destroy our people. Be the spook who is going to instead weaponize the legal system in a way that can put us on the offense as opposed to constantly being on the defense. We had another caller into the show this morning who, after hearing this discussion, had a bit of a change of heart as it pertains to how she has, throughout the entirety of her life, approached this topic of juries. Take a listen. Audrey in Detroit, first-time caller.
Hi, I'm so honored to talk with you, Lurie. I've been listening to you. My sister turned me on to you, and I love you, Craig Klein, and Karen Hunter.
Thank you.
But my call is for the jury. Mm-hmm. I was one of those people that would throw away the summons, act like if somebody said something, I didn't get it. But now, after listening to you, next time I get one, I will fill it out. I will hopefully get picked.
Wow. What now? Why do you say that?
That I didn't to get picked?
Mm-hmm.
Because listen to you explain the nullification, and that our people need to be representative on the jury pool.
That's right. So y'all in the Lurie Breaks It Down audience, I need y'all to be like Miss Audrey. I need you to recognize, hey, you may have had one perspective about jury nullification, or should I say one perspective about jury service before, but now that you see what it looks like to serve on a jury and to wield that power, I need you all to reconsider. One, I need you, if you're not already registered to vote, to register to vote, because you can't even get on the jury if you're not a part of the voter registration pools in most places. So go ahead and register to vote, which you should be doing anyway, because if you're not registered to vote, that means you're not using the vote to hire and fire the politicians. Politicians are the people who decide who gets the resources and who doesn't, and you don't want to let the white nationalists pick the people who get to distribute the resources. That would be silly, and that would get you more of what we currently have. Register to vote. And then vote, but register to vote, and then also be on the lookout for that mail, because in your mailbox is going to come a jury notification notice. It's going to say, welcome, we want you to come down to potentially serve on a jury, and then I'm going to need you to actually go. I don't need it. We, the people, need you to do your part, your small part of helping us to keep our communities safe. It's not the easiest thing in the world. And frankly, some of it is a little boring. It's a lot boring sometimes, it is. But can you be one of the guardians of community? Can you be someone that our community looks to? It's a very simple thing. White people are doing it all the time. And then if you are an elder who is retired, or you are somebody whose employment situation allows you to do it, you should be over-indexing in jury options to serve. And remember, one of the most important things you can do as a potential member of any jury is to never, ever, ever talk about jury nullification once you get into the courthouse. You never, ever, ever talk about jury nullification once you're waiting in the line to get to the jury. You do all your jury nullification talking and discussing somewhere else, not at the courthouse. And it's really important that we figure out how to do this as effectively as possible, because if they're going to replicate what they have done in D.C. and Black communities all across this nation, we better make sure that the only people serving on juries with us is us. I'm Lurie Daniel Favors, and this has been another episode of Lurie Breaks It Down. And like I said at the beginning, if you liked what you heard, give us 5 stars and tell everyone you know and share the podcast with them. And if you didn't like it, honey, just please keep it to yourself and just pray our strength. Don't forget to check out my YouTube page, Lurie Daniel Favors Media, where you can subscribe, like, and share. And you should subscribe, like, and share. And you will get notified when I post videos from my show and go live with my YouTube audience. Gotta go. Love you. Peace.